I had been planning this proposal for months. Everything was set, right down to the last detail. Tonight was supposed to be perfect, the moment I would ask Samantha, my girlfriend of 3 years, to be my wife. A small, elegant restaurant overlooking the city, the perfect ring tucked away in my pocket, and a speech that I had rehearsed 100 times over. She'd be stunned. I could already picture the tears in her eyes, her hands flying to her mouth in shock and joy. But as I looked at my phone, something shattered that picture-perfect future I had been dreaming of. Just as I was about to head out, I got a message from a friend. "Man, you need to see this." Attached was a photo. My heart pounded as I hesitated, hovering my finger over the image. Then, unable to resist, I tapped it, and everything I'd known came crashing down. The photo was unmistakable. Samantha, the woman I was about to propose to, in the arms of another man. The scene was intimate. Her hand on his chest, her face close to his, caught in a moment that should have been ours. My breath hitched, and my stomach turned. It felt like the floor was giving way beneath me. I didn't know what to feel first: rage, betrayal, or a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. There was no mistaking what I was seeing. And with one swift realization, I knew the night wouldn't go as planned. But I also knew I wasn't about to sit back and let this happen. I canceled the dinner reservation. I had no intention of asking Samantha anything now, except for the truth. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every image in my mind, every moment of laughter, shared secrets, dreams, tainted. Part of me didn't want to believe it, to think maybe there was some other explanation. But deep down, I knew better. The truth was staring me right in the face, and I had to confront it. I knew where she'd be tonight. Samantha had planned a night out with her friends, or at least that's what she told me. I decided I'd head there first. My pulse raced as I drove, heart thumping louder with each mile. I rehearsed what I'd say to her, a dozen versions of the confrontation playing out in my mind, but nothing seemed to do justice to what I felt. I wanted answers. No, I needed answers. Pulling up outside the bar where she was supposed to be, I sat in my car and waited. I scrolled through my phone, finding the photo my friend sent, studying it. Every detail, the look on her face, her closeness to him. It was clear. This was no mistake, no misunderstanding. After a few minutes, I saw her step out of the bar. She laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. She hadn't seen me yet, so I watched as she crossed the street, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked carefree, almost like nothing could touch her. But that was about to change. I got out of the car, my mind racing with everything I wanted to say. The proposal, the ring, the perfect life I'd imagined. It all felt like a cruel joke. I was done hiding. I walked right up to her, and when she looked up and saw me, the color drained from her face. "Going somewhere?" I asked, my voice barely holding back the rage I felt. Her eyes widened, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind, her struggle to come up with a plausible excuse. "Why are you here?" she stammered, taking a step back. But there was no escaping this now. She was caught, and she knew it. Her eyes darted around, looking for a way out, but we both knew there was nowhere to hide. The street was quiet, only the faint hum of traffic in the distance, and there we stood, locked in a standoff of unspoken betrayal. I could feel my heartbeat drumming in my ears, a cold rush of adrenaline flooding through me. "Samantha," I said, holding up my phone and the damning picture on its screen. "Explain this." Her gaze flicked down to the screen. I watched her eyes widen, then narrow, as she processed what I was showing her. A flicker of panic crossed her face, followed by something like defiance, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing next. "Why were you looking through my photos?" she snapped, her voice shaky but sharp. She crossed her arms, trying to pull off a stance of indignation, but I could see the cracks forming. "This is a complete invasion of privacy." "Privacy?" I shot back, unable to believe her audacity. "That's what you're worried about? You're out here with someone else, with another guy, and you're mad that I found out?" For a second, I thought I saw her real emotions, a shadow of guilt in her eyes, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it came. She took a deep breath, collecting herself, and then, In a tone that was meant to sound controlled, she said, "This is just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the silence between us. So, holding hands, whispering sweet nothings with him, just some big, innocent misunderstanding? I saw her hesitate, trying to come up with something, anything that would let her slip away. But I wasn't going to let her go that easily. I'd held on to this relationship, to the idea of our future, for so long that her betrayal had taken everything I thought I knew about her and shattered it. And she knew it. "You know what?" I said, my voice low but fierce. "I was going to propose tonight. I was going to spend the rest of my life with you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring box, holding it up for her to see. Her mouth opened slightly, and I watched her pale as she realized just what she destroyed. She tried to say something, but no words came out. The ring glinted under the streetlights, a harsh reminder of everything we'd lost in that one deceitful moment. I put it back in my pocket and took a step back, feeling the weight of everything she'd thrown away. "It's over, Samantha," I said finally, letting the words sink in. "You made your choice. Now live with it." For the first time since I confronted her, Samantha's confident facade shattered. She looked at me, wide-eyed, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for words. I could see the reality sinking in, her mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. The woman who'd once held my heart, who I thought I'd known better than anyone, was now just someone who had torn my life apart in a single moment. She reached out a hand toward me. "Wait, please, let me explain," she stammered, a look of desperation in her eyes. I stepped back, out of her reach. "Explain what, Samantha? Explain how you've been with someone else this whole time while pretending to love me." "It wasn't like that," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "I was just confused, okay? I didn't mean for it to happen. I was going through a rough time and—" "Save it," I interrupted, cutting her off before she could go into some kind of excuse. "Do you really think any explanation is going to make this right?" She wiped her tears, shaking her head as if she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to believe me." My stomach twisted, anger flaring up inside me again. "Believe you?" I scoffed. "The only thing I believe is that you lied to me, you betrayed me, and now you're trying to cover it up." Her face fell, and I could see the realization that this was really over beginning to set in. She looked down, her hands shaking slightly, as she whispered, I never thought you'd find out like this." That one sentence, those simple words, hit me harder than I expected. She hadn't thought I'd find out. She had planned on carrying this on, lying to my face while I devoted everything to her. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of me. "I can't believe you," I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. "All these months, I thought I was building a life with you, planning a future, but you were already halfway out the door with someone else." Samantha looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, but I didn't feel sympathy anymore. I didn't feel anything but a cold, empty space where my love for her used to be. "Goodbye, Samantha," I said firmly, turning away from her. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but you won't find it with me." I walked away, leaving her standing there on the sidewalk, watching as the world we'd built together crumbled into nothing. Walking away from Samantha felt like both a victory and a loss. A part of me wanted to turn around, to see if she was still there, if she'd chase after me or call out. But I kept my eyes forward, putting one foot in front of the other, forcing myself to move on. Every step felt like ripping off a new layer of hurt, but it also felt like I was taking back control over my life, my heart, my future. When I reached my car, I got inside and just sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel and staring out the window. The world outside felt muted, as if everything was happening behind a foggy pane of glass. The weight of what I'd just done started to settle in. The end of a 3-year relationship, the shattered dreams of a life we'd planned, and the sudden emptiness where love had once been. I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The anger, the sadness, the betrayal. It all felt like too much, too big to hold. I'd never imagined this was how our story would end. And yet, there was no denying that she'd left me with no other choice. There was no way back. After a few minutes, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken of us over the years. Each one felt like a dagger, a reminder of the person I thought she was. I paused on a photo from last summer, a beach trip we'd taken together, her laughing with the wind in her hair, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. I remembered how happy I'd felt in that moment, believing we were on the path to something real and lasting. But that image was just an illusion now, a cruel reminder of the deception she'd kept hidden. With a deep breath, I selected all our photos and deleted them, one by one, erasing every trace of her from my phone. It was painful, like tearing out a piece of my heart, but I knew I had to do it. Finally, I came to the last photo, the one from the night we'd celebrated our anniversary. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the delete button. But then, with a final burst of resolve, I pressed it, watching as the last image of our life together vanished. I exhaled, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. She was gone, and so was every lie she'd told, every false promise she'd made. It was over, and I was free. As I started the car and drove away, I felt a flicker of something else, a spark of hope, a glimmer of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. The next day, I woke up with an emptiness that felt like it would swallow me whole. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from last night, every word Samantha had said, every tear she'd shed. But each time I thought about her face, her excuses, the flimsy lies, my anger reignited. She hadn't thought she'd get caught. She had actually believed she could keep me wrapped around her finger while betraying me behind my back. I knew I had to get out of the house, to stop dwelling on the memories, so I called my best friend, Liam. He'd been the one helping me plan the proposal, even going with me to pick out the ring. If there was anyone who would understand the depth of my hurt, it was him. When he picked up, I kept my voice steady, but he could hear it. "You good, man?" he asked, a note of concern creeping in. "Can you meet me at Sam's diner?" I replied, not giving him any details. He didn't ask questions. He never did when he knew something serious was going on. 15 minutes later, I was sitting across from him, coffee in hand. He took one look at my face and let out a low whistle. "All right," he said, bracing himself. "What happened?" I told him everything. About the proposal, the photo, the confrontation on the street. He sat in silence, nodding now and then, his eyes narrowing with each word. By the time I was done, his jaw was clenched and his fists were balled on the table. "She had the nerve to try and explain," he spat, barely containing his anger. "Unbelievable. After everything you've done for her. And she didn't even have the decency to come clean?" "Exactly," I said, running a hand through my hair. "I thought she loved me. I thought she was the one. But she wasn't even honest with me for a second." Liam shook his head, looking as though he wanted to punch something. "You deserve better than that, man. And she'll regret it, trust me. When she realizes what she lost, she'll be begging to have you back." "Yeah, well, she won't get the chance," I replied, the finality in my voice surprising even me. "I'm done with her, and I don't want to hear from her again." We talked for a while longer, the conversation veering from hurt to anger to disbelief. It felt good, though, to have someone who understood, someone who wasn't going to tell me to forgive her or give her another chance. Liam knew me better than anyone, and he knew I'd made the right decision. Before we left, he put a hand on my shoulder. "Look, you don't have to go through this alone. Whatever you need, I'm here." And for the first time since everything had happened, I felt like I could breathe. I still had a lot of healing to do, but at least I wasn't facing it alone. A few days passed. I'd thrown myself into work, trying to drown out the memories and the lingering pain. But even with all the distractions, it was hard to escape the constant reminder of Samantha. Every quiet moment, every break in the day, she would creep back into my thoughts, like a ghost refusing to be laid to rest. Then, one afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. I didn't recognize it at first, but the words told me everything I needed to know. "Can we talk? Please. I owe you an apology." It was Samantha. My jaw clenched, my stomach twisting. Part of me wanted to delete the message, to pretend I hadn't seen it and move on. But curiosity, or maybe some small, masochistic need to hear her squirm, kept me from doing it. I took a deep breath and replied, "What's there to talk about?" The response was immediate. "I know I hurt you. I want to explain. Please give me a chance to say something." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. Maybe it was the lingering hurt, maybe it was the need for some kind of closure, but I found myself waiting for her that evening in a nearby park, wondering what kind of twisted excuse she'd come up with this time. When she arrived, she looked different. Gone was the confident, carefree woman I'd once known. Her eyes were downcast, her shoulders hunched, as though the weight of her actions had finally begun to settle in. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'm sorry," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I can't believe I messed everything up like this." I folded my arms, waiting for more. She glanced at me, then looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I was stupid," she continued. "I don't even know why I did it. You were everything to me, and I threw it all away." Her words hung in the air, but I wasn't moved. She might have been sorry, but it didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, lied to me, and left me in pieces. I took a step closer, meeting her gaze. "Is that it?" I asked coldly. "Because I'm sorry doesn't undo what you did. It doesn't change the fact that you were ready to keep lying to me, even while I was planning our future together." She flinched, visibly hurt by my words, but I didn't care. For once, she was feeling what I'd felt, and it was long overdue. "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that. I regret everything. I know I don't deserve you." For a second, silence stretched between us. Part of me wanted to tell her off, to unload every ounce of pain and betrayal I'd felt since the day I found out. But another part of me realized that I was done with her. I didn't need her apologies or her guilt. I just needed to move on. "Good luck, Samantha," I said finally, turning to leave. "I hope you figure yourself out, but this is the last time we speak." And with that, I walked away, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was really over, and this time, I wasn't looking back. After that last encounter with Samantha, it felt like a weight had been lifted. She was finally out of my life, and I'd said everything I needed to. But healing from that kind of betrayal wasn't as simple as turning the page. I still woke up some nights with the bitterness of it lingering, wondering if the trust I'd lost could ever be rebuilt, with anyone. To keep myself grounded, I focused on things I hadn't given enough attention to when I was with Samantha. My friendships, for one. My buddies had been there for me through every heartbreak and disappointment, yet I drifted from them when I got serious with her. I realized how much I'd missed out on. Those late nights talking trash over beers, spontaneous road trips, even just shooting hoops at the park. So, I started reaching out to them again, spending more time reconnecting. Liam, especially, had been a constant anchor since the breakup. He didn't pressure me to open up but was always there, ready to distract me with a movie or some outlandish idea for the weekend. One weekend, Liam and a few others dragged me to a camping trip. Honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready for a night out in the wilderness. No distractions, no noise, just nature and my thoughts. But as we sat around the campfire, telling old stories, laughing about everything and nothing, I felt something stir in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. The cool night air, the crackling of the fire, the stars overhead. It all reminded me of the world beyond the pain I'd been clinging to. I didn't have to be the guy who'd been cheated on. I could be the guy who picked himself up, who rediscovered the things that made him happy, who could eventually, maybe, trust again. Sitting around that fire, I realized that while Samantha's betrayal had hurt, it didn't define me. I had spent months planning a future with her, but maybe that was never meant to be my future. Maybe it was just one chapter in my story, a painful one, but one I'd survive. By the time we headed back home, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. There was still a lot of hurt to work through, a lot of memories to let go of, but I was finally seeing a way forward. And for the first time, I wasn't just pretending to be okay. I was actually beginning to feel it. Over the next few weeks, I embraced the single life fully. I threw myself into work, took up running again, and started exploring interests I'd let slip during my relationship with Samantha. It was liberating to focus solely on myself, to not worry about anyone else's plans or opinions. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee at a new spot in town, I ran into Sarah, an old college friend. We'd had a few classes together back in the day, but life had taken us on different paths after graduation. She looked surprised to see me, but her smile was warm and welcoming. "Hey, stranger," she greeted, giving me a friendly hug. "Long time, no see." We quickly fell into an easy conversation, reminiscing about college days, mutual friends, and all the changes in our lives. It felt good to talk to someone who didn't know about my recent heartbreak, someone who saw me as more than just the guy who'd been cheated on. As we chatted, I found myself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in ages. She had this way of making even the most mundane things sound exciting, like her recent obsession with trying every hiking trail within 50 miles of the city. Her energy was contagious, and before I knew it, I'd agreed to join her on a hike that weekend. That Saturday, we met early in the morning, lacing up our boots and heading out into the crisp autumn air. The trail was steep and challenging, but Sarah's enthusiasm kept us going, her laughter ringing through the trees as we stumbled over rocks and tackled inclines. We talked about everything: work, family, travel plans, dreams, and somewhere along the way, I realized that I hadn't thought about Samantha even once. When we finally reached the summit, we stood there, looking out over the rolling hills, the sun casting a golden light over the landscape. Sarah looked over at me and smiled. "There's nothing quite like this, is there?" she asked, her voice soft. "No, there really isn't," I replied, taking in the view. And as I stood there, feeling the quiet peace of the moment, I knew I was finally ready to let go of the past and open myself up to new possibilities. Sarah wasn't someone I had any romantic intentions with, at least not yet. But she was a reminder that there was a life beyond betrayal, that there were good, genuine people still out there. People who could make me feel alive again, who could help me rediscover the things that truly mattered. As we hiked back down, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that my story didn't have to end in heartbreak, and that, somewhere down the line, there might be a new chapter worth exploring. That hike with Sarah became the start of a new routine. Every weekend, we'd pick a different trail, a new challenge, and tackle it together. Hiking became more than just a physical activity. It was a way to clear my mind, to push myself, and in many ways, to rebuild. Sarah was an amazing hiking buddy, always pushing me just a little bit harder, encouraging me to reach farther, and distracting me with stories from her life. Her positivity was like a breath of fresh air in my life. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized how much I'd let myself shrink into a small version of who I was. With Samantha, I'd become wrapped up in her life, her needs, and our supposed future together, leaving my own passions and goals on the back burner. But with Sarah, it was different. She made me see the importance of pursuing my own path, of being someone whole and complete on my own, rather than relying on a relationship to define me. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling hike, we collapsed onto a bench near a scenic overlook, catching our breath as we looked out over the valley below. The wind brushed against us, carrying a cool autumn scent, and for a moment, we just sat in silence. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah asked, "Do you ever think about what you want your life to look like, say, 5 years from now?" I paused, her question hitting me harder than I'd expected. 5 years. Before, that future had included Samantha, a family, maybe even a house. But now, everything had changed. I used to have it all mapped out, I admitted, staring down at the rocky path beneath my feet. But now, I don't know. She nodded, her gaze distant. It's strange, isn't it? How we think we have everything planned, and then life just happens. Sometimes it's awful, but other times it opens doors we never knew existed. I looked at her, feeling a pang of gratitude. "You've helped me see that," I said honestly. "I thought I was lost, that everything I'd wanted was gone. But now, I feel like I have a chance to start fresh." Sarah smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Well, good. Because you deserve that, you know? You deserve a life that makes you happy, whether it's with someone or on your own. That conversation stuck with me. On my drive home, I kept replaying her words in my mind. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost, on the betrayal and pain, that I'd forgotten about the opportunity that came with it. A chance to redefine myself, to focus on what truly mattered, and to build a future based on my own dreams, not someone else's. That night, I sat down and made a list of all the things I'd set aside, the goals and dreams I'd nearly forgotten. Travel plans, personal achievements, career moves. I wrote them down, one by one, each one reminding me of who I was before I'd lost myself in a relationship. And as I looked at that list, I felt a surge of determination. This was my life, and I was taking it back. With my list in hand, I started setting things in motion. First on the list was a personal goal I'd shelved ages ago. Taking a solo trip somewhere I'd always wanted to go. I dreamed of visiting the Pacific Northwest, exploring the lush forests, mountains, and coastal views that had always seemed like something out of a fairy tale. It felt like the perfect way to officially mark my new beginning. I booked the trip for a weekend, just a couple of weeks away, enough time to prepare without letting doubt or hesitation creep in. The plan was simple. Rent a small cabin, go hiking, and just be with myself, away from the city, from reminders of the past, and from everything I was trying to move on from. This wasn't just about the scenery. It was about learning to enjoy my own company again, to embrace solitude without letting it feel like loneliness. When the day finally arrived, I packed my gear, loaded up the car, and set off. The drive was long, but the miles seemed to roll by effortlessly. With every hour that passed, I felt the weight of the past few months begin to lift, piece by piece. There was something incredibly freeing about being on the road alone, with nothing but my thoughts and the endless horizon stretching out in front of me. The cabin was exactly what I'd hoped for. Small and cozy, nestled between towering trees with a view of snow-capped mountains in the distance. It was the kind of quiet that soothed the mind, a silence filled only with the sounds of nature. I spent the first evening sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, feeling a calmness settle over me that I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, I set out on a hike, one that would lead me to a high point overlooking a valley. As I trekked up the trail, the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves underfoot felt like a melody. With each step, I thought about the journey that had led me here. Not just the literal one to this place, but the emotional path I'd been on since discovering Samantha's betrayal. When I reached the summit, I stood there, breathing in the crisp mountain air, looking out over the endless expanse of trees and hills that stretched to the horizon. I felt small, but in a good way, like my troubles and heartache were insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Life was so much bigger than the pain of a broken relationship. Standing there, I felt a surge of gratitude, not for the pain, but for the lessons it had taught me, for the chance to rediscover myself, to learn what I was capable of, to take back my independence and build something new. I wasn't just someone who'd been betrayed. I was someone who'd endured, who'd come through the other side, stronger and wiser. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let it all go. The anger, the hurt, the memories. And when I opened them again, I felt lighter, as if a burden I'd been carrying had finally slipped away. This trip had marked a new chapter in my life, one that was about growth, self-discovery, and resilience. I knew I had a long way to go, but I was ready for it. For the first time in a long time, I was truly, deeply ready. Returning from the trip, I felt like a different person. The ache of betrayal was still there, but it felt dulled, distant, as if I'd finally put enough space between myself and the pain to see it for what it was. A wound that was healing, slowly but surely. I'd reclaimed parts of myself on that mountain, parts one hadn't even realized I'd lost, and now I was determined to bring that newfound strength back to my everyday life. One of the things I'd let go of during my relationship with Samantha was photography. I'd always loved capturing moments, from beautiful landscapes to simple everyday scenes. It had been a passion of mine, but over time, I'd stopped taking photos, too focused on our life together to make time for my own pursuits. Now, with a fresh start, I decided to pick up my camera again. letting it be a way of seeing the world through new eyes. At first, it was small things. A shot of the autumn leaves falling on the sidewalk, the flicker of city lights at dusk, reflections in puddles after the rain. Each shot felt like reclaiming a bit more of myself, a reminder that beauty could be found everywhere, even in the quietest corners. I started sharing my photos online, not for attention, but to have a space to document this new chapter in my life. As the weeks went by, I found myself slowly reconnecting with people I'd drifted away from. Friends I hadn't seen in ages started reaching out, curious about the changes they'd sensed in me, the sense of calm and contentment that had replaced the bitterness I'd carried before. They noticed, and I felt it too. I was becoming someone I was proud of again, someone who wasn't defined by a failed relationship or a painful betrayal, but by the choices I was making every day to move forward. One Saturday afternoon, Sarah invited me to an outdoor art exhibit downtown. It was one of those cool, crisp autumn days where the air is electric, filled with the promise of change. We wandered through the open-air gallery, admiring paintings, sculptures, and installations from local artists. It was refreshing, seeing art from a perspective I hadn't explored in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive in a way I couldn't quite describe, like I was connecting with the world around me on a deeper level. At one point, Sarah nudged me, nodding toward a small art print of a mountain landscape, the same mountain range I'd visited on my solo trip. The artist had captured it at dawn, a soft light illuminating the peaks and valleys in a way that made the scene feel almost otherworldly. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. I nodded, feeling a warmth settle over me. "Yeah, it really is." That evening, I bought the print and hung it on my wall as a reminder of how far I'd come. Every time I looked at it, I'd remember that journey, that feeling of standing on top of the world with nothing but possibility ahead. This new life was taking shape, slowly but surely, with each photo, each connection, each small moment of joy. And for the first time, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As the months passed, I found myself settling into a rhythm, a life that felt both familiar and brand new. Photography, reconnecting with friends, and exploring the city with Sarah had brought me a sense of purpose and stability. But there was one thing I'd been avoiding: the idea of opening up my heart again. The memory of betrayal still lingered, and while I felt stronger, the thought of being vulnerable with someone scared me. Sarah, though, had become a close friend, someone who'd helped me rediscover life's joys without expecting anything in return. One evening, after we'd finished hiking a familiar trail, we sat on a bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and pink. There was a quiet moment where I could feel the unspoken words hovering between us, the possibility of something more than friendship. "Do you ever feel like maybe this isn't just friendship?" she asked, her voice soft, hesitant. My heart skipped a beat. I looked over at her, noticing the way her gaze was steady, unafraid, and I felt the familiar mix of excitement and fear bubbling up. But there was something about Sarah, something genuine and steady that made me want to take a chance, even with the scars I still carried. "I've thought about it," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to ruin what we have. This friendship has meant more to me than you'll ever know." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "Me too. And I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. But if you're ever open to it, I'd like to see where this could go." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that moment settle over us. For the first time since everything had fallen apart with Samantha, I felt a flicker of hope. Not the naive hope I'd had before, but a cautious, steady one that made me think that maybe, just maybe, I could let someone in again. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, letting the idea settle, neither of us feeling the need to rush or push. It was a strange feeling, allowing myself to consider love again, not out of desperation, but because I genuinely felt ready. I didn't know if we'd become something more, but I knew that I trusted Sarah, that her presence in my life had been nothing but a gift. And whether we stayed friends or ventured into something deeper, I knew that I was lucky to have her in my life. As we headed back down the trail, I felt a new kind of excitement, one grounded in the knowledge that I was different now. I was no longer defined by the pain of betrayal. Instead, I was someone who had faced that hurt, who had healed from it, and who was open. Cautiously, yes, but open nonetheless, to the possibility of love. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far I'd come. I'd lost so much, but I'd also gained something far more valuable, a sense of who I was and what I wanted from life. And for the first time, I felt ready to share that with someone, to let them see me, scars and all. The next few weeks passed with a new sense of anticipation. Sarah and I continued to spend time together, and with each outing, I felt the barriers around my heart start to come down. There was a thrill to it, this careful dance of opening up and holding back. We were learning about each other, testing the waters, each moment filled with a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. One Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves wandering through a farmer's market. The lively crowd, the scent of fresh produce and flowers, the energy, it all felt invigorating, like a scene out of a movie. At one stall, Sarah picked up a bouquet of wildflowers and handed them to me with a playful smile. "These look like your kind of flowers," she teased. "Oh yeah," I replied, grinning. "Why's that?" "They're resilient," she said, her eyes softening. "Beautiful but tough. They're the kind that survive storms and grow back even stronger." Her words hung in the air, and suddenly, it didn't feel like a joke. I looked down at the bouquet, then back at her, feeling a warmth settle over me. Without thinking, I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. She looked up at me, surprised but smiling, her cheeks tinged with a blush that made my heart skip. It felt natural, standing there with her, holding her hand amidst the bustling crowd. The doubts and fears that had once plagued me seemed distant, replaced by a quiet certainty that this was where I was meant to be. I didn't need grand gestures or elaborate plans. I just needed this, the small moments, the quiet laughs, the hand in mine. As we walked through the market, hand in hand, I realized that I'd taken a leap without even realizing it. I'd allowed myself to let go of the hurt, to give trust another chance. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the simple joy of being in the moment, of sharing it with someone who valued me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. That evening, we sat by the lake, watching the sunset in comfortable silence. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a deep peace settle over me. There was no rush, no pressure, just us, together, as if the world had paused just for this moment. "I'm glad you're here," I murmured, feeling the truth of the words sink in. "Me too," she whispered back, her voice warm and steady. And in that simple moment, I knew I'd found something worth holding on to, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. Because after everything, I'd finally found a piece of happiness I was ready to embrace. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and I eased into a rhythm, building something real, something steady and full of promise. We didn't rush anything. Each moment felt intentional, like we were carefully constructing the foundation of something lasting. Every time we were together, it felt like I was uncovering a new part of myself, one that I hadn't realized I'd been hiding away, protecting. And Sarah, with her warmth and laughter, had become my safe place. There were still days when the shadows of the past would creep in, moments when doubts or memories of betrayal resurfaced. But those moments grew weaker over time, and whenever they did appear, I'd remind myself of how far I'd come. I'd rebuilt my life, piece by piece, and each day I chose to leave the hurt behind in favor of something better, something worth believing in. One evening, we decided to take a trip up to the same mountain I'd climbed on my solo journey months before. I hadn't returned to that spot since, but I felt a strong pull to go back and share it with her, to close the circle on the journey I'd started alone. We hiked up in the cool morning air, laughing and reminiscing as we made our way to the top. The trail was challenging, but with Sarah by my side, it felt different, like I was revisiting a chapter that had once been painful but was now healed. When we reached the summit, we stood there in silence, taking in the vastness of the view. The mountains stretched out in front of us, a reminder of everything I'd conquered to get here. I turned to Sarah, who was gazing at the landscape with awe, and I felt a rush of gratitude. This was the life I'd chosen, the life I'd rebuilt, and she was now a part of it. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a gentle warmth. "This is beautiful," she whispered, linking her hand with mine. "Thank you for bringing me here." I smiled, feeling a deep contentment settle within me. "It means a lot to me that you're here," I replied, my voice steady and sure. I didn't know it back then, but I think I was always meant to share this moment with someone who understands. She squeezed my hand, her gaze unwavering. "We're in this together," she said softly, as if sealing a quiet promise between us. And as we stood there, the wind brushing past us, I felt a calmness, a sense of closure and new beginnings. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, they had all been part of the journey, shaping me into the person I was now. And I realized, standing there with Sarah, that I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by how I'd chosen to rise above it. This was the start of a new chapter, one built on trust, resilience, and the strength I'd found in myself. I knew there would be more challenges, more twists and turns, but I was ready. I'd learned to trust myself, to find joy in the small moments, and to let love back into my life. Not because I needed it to be whole, but because I wanted it. As the sun began to set, casting golden hues over the mountains, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was my life, and I was ready to embrace it fully, with every scar, every lesson, and every new promise I was making to myself and to Sarah. I had found my way back to happiness, and this time, I was determined to hold on to it. Thank you for joining this journey of healing and new beginnings. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories on resilience and growth. Here's to finding strength in unexpected places.